Good morning. In this talk, I'm going to apologize at least twice. The first apology is this one. My apologies for this dull and policy-driven title. But at least it has the advantage of containing the two terms that I think are important, at least for my message: planning and federation. And for federated, you can also read distributed or collaboration or whatever. On this journey through the federated landscape, we'll meet Dans, very briefly. I'll tell about the federated data infrastructure that is emerging in the Netherlands, some services for front offices, because we like front offices, and I'll tell a bit about costs, activities. I am a policy officer at Dans. Also project manager, part-time. And DANS is an institute of the Royal Dutch Academy for Arts and Sciences and of NWO, which is the major research funder in the Netherlands, the counterpart to DFG, what you could say. And DANS was founded for promoting and providing sustainable access to research information, research data, we used to say, but it's broader than that, it's information. Also referring to the projects, the funders, the researchers. Under the name of DANS, we exist now for about 10 years, but the first predecessor was older, and this year we celebrate the 50th birthday of our oldest data set. But of course, what we achieved in the past is not a guarantee that we can maintain this long-term archiving in a proper way. But okay, let's discuss about that later. I'll tell you a bit about the services that we provide, and the major one I think is the archive that's also called EASY, like with ADS, that Katie Green spoke about. It's an acronym standing for Electronic Archiving System, and it was developed for self-deposit. So individual researchers were supposed to deposit their data by themselves, voluntarily. We have data mainly from social sciences and humanities. We have a large part of archaeology, because Dutch archaeologists, commercial ones and academic ones, are supposed to entrust us with their data. This is a slide just to indicate that you never know when data will become popular in the future. So the curves are different. When someone deposits their data, they are free to assign what audiences they think are relevant or will find these data relevant. And we see there is no straightforward connection between the number of available data sets and the popularity, the number of downloads. So we stick to downloads because, like the others, we find it hard to track if they are really being reused or only downloaded and then discarded. Another service is Narcis. That's a portal, basically. And the metadata within that portal are harvested from nearly 30 institutional repositories in the Netherlands. And you can find researchers and data sets and publications. All academic publications should be discoverable through Narcis. And the third one, mentioned yesterday already by Kevin, is a Dutch instance of Dataverse. Dataverse comes from Harvard University. And Utrecht University took the initiative to make a Dutch part of it. Lots of universities and institutions are interested in using it as a platform for short-term and mid-term storage of data, but also collaboration. Not really collaboration, but at least sharing the data. So that's roughly the intended use. But it's still very exploratory. There are no massive sets of data to be found there right now. But we support this idea of not just our own core activity of the long-term archiving, but also thinking about all the steps that precede them and that have been carried out by researchers and supported by their institutes, for instance. In 2010, this report was published with the recommendation that a framework for collaborative data infrastructure should be put into place. It should emerge. And if you see those 3 layers, which you can't read, I'm afraid, I'll show you in the Dutch version, as we like to see it. And these 3 layers have multiplied to 4 because we split up the middle level into a front office level and a back office level. So starting from the top, you have the researchers generating data or reusing data. One level below is the so-called front office, and in our terminology, that is composed of the local experts, people within your institution who know about your kind of research, your kind of data, your kind of technical infrastructure. What is our policy on storing data or how backup? And then at the 3rd level, the back offices, that is the kind of organizations like us and our colleagues who are not so much part of the research, but part of the research cycle at a later stage. And then at the bottom, there's the really basic technical infrastructure with the large storage facilities. So it's more detailed than that. I left a few copies of the brochure in the upper part of the room. So if you're interested, take them with you or find them on our website. In this back office layer, you also see 3TU Data Centrum. That is the data center of the 3 technical universities in the Netherlands. 3TU Data Center and DANS and recently Surfsara, a larger storage provider in the Netherlands, have joined forces under the name of Research Data Netherlands. This is our homepage, with the idea that we can work better and more efficient and effective if we join forces and not talk to all these universities and knowledge institutes on our own. And if you now zoom in on this front office back on this federated model, on the 3 top layers, then you see something that we really promote as Research Data Netherlands, so with the red cover, so to speak. In the middle, there's a front office. Front office staff can typically work at libraries, or at the IT department, or perhaps at the legal department, knowing lots about the legal issues, IPR, and stuff like that. They are typically located at a nice place, and they are very nice people and welcoming, and they will try to answer all the questions researchers might have. And we as a back office, who don't typically speak the language of the researchers, unlike what Sarah sketched, at DANS we are to some extent ignorant of research. We try to cover the social sciences and the humanities, which is rather broad, and we are unable to discuss with individual researchers the depth of their research. We don't check it when they deposit it, and we can't help them with all their questions. So for us it's very convenient to have the front office in between. They provide information to the research community. They raise awareness for data management by means of training, for instance. They support virtual research environments, as they are called nowadays in Europe. And they liaise with us, of course. We, in turn, try to help the front office people to get the knowledge that they might not have about long-term preservation, for instance. Of course, we have to develop our own knowledge about permanent accessibility of data and reuse. And we participate in initiatives of certification of trusted digital repositories. The data seal of approval, for instance, but also the DIN Nestor seal, and there is an ISO standard for repositories. It's nice to have a model. What does it look like in practice? Well, there are 2 extremes that I'd like to mention. Our contact partners basically work in the libraries. So there are libraries who say, yes, I like this idea of the front office, back office model, and I think we want to be a good front office, we are good and we want to be better. And we can provide researchers with more information than we used to, and we'll stimulate that they will manage the data in a good way. And basically that is how it already has worked for some time. So the researcher continues to deposit their data with us or the partners, and we will be charging as of January 1st the front offices and their institutions for the cost of long-term archiving. And that goes along with a collaboration agreement, which we don't have now. So far, depositing is free. The other extreme is where the front office staff take full responsibility. There is one case where now, that's Wageningen University in the middle of the Netherlands. They have a very firm data librarian who really places herself in front of her researchers and says, no, we deal with DANS, we deal with 3TO data center, and if you have questions, you come to me. And it goes so far, and actually I like that they take that responsibility. It goes so far that if an individual researcher from Wageningen University contacts us, we politely refer them back to their own university and their own front office. So that's the other extreme. And we don't know how it will develop, and there will be other tailor-made contracts we expect. To help, where necessary, the front office staff to do their work, we have a training. It's a blended training, so 2 days face-to-face meeting, and in between there's a lot of information to be found at the website. The website is in Dutch and English, and you can also do the online-only course, so if you're curious, you're welcome. A lot of the energy spent on the course deals with data management, of course, and the major reason, or not really reason, the major trigger, perhaps I should say, is that research funders are paying attention to it and making demands. One of these research funders, this is a smaller one, I'll also tell about the other one, ZonMW, they have changed their terms and conditions for grants, and since last summer they say, well, we are co-producer of any data you produce with our funding. And co-producer is not that they want to own it, but they want to prevent it from being locked away. And the other part of the change is that any grant recipient must draw up a data management plan, saying how will I share my data, when will I make them available to third parties, and how will I make them accessible, and also where am I going to store it. The other funder, NWO, which is also one of our funders, I'm sorry I don't have the English slide, this is one of their original slides, but noblesse oblige won't be a problem. If you want us to pay you for your research, we ask something in return from you. We ask from you maximum access to the data that you will generate. We want you to comply with any codes of conduct, and there are several for researchers. The data should be sustainably stored in a digital repository with an international qualification. That is a bit much because there aren't too many of them in the Netherlands right now, or in the relevant disciplines, but all right, it's a good ambition. And they have the same slogan as DANS uses, open access if possible and restricted where needed. Now, about the planning part, which is my pet peeve. I think that a data management plan is not so important. It is the act of planning, it is the reflection on data and on a scientific behavior that is important. It is the reflection on who am I going to need to make this a success. Do I need IT knowledge? Do I need statistical knowledge? Do I need to know anything about whatever? That is what the data management plan obligation should trigger in the mind of the researchers. Some researchers, not all. This is a slide from the course. So this is also where we say to front office staff, please reuse what's there. A lot of templates. There's the DMP online tool. Don't reinvent too much on your own. And involve other stakeholders. Now, who are these stakeholders beyond this trio? We expect and we hope that each institution will have its own research data policy. Currently, at 5 of the 13 universities in the Netherlands, there is such a policy, an explicit policy on how to deal with research data. And like Sarah said, data can be anything. Nevertheless, it may be good to make it explicit what you understand, what you mean by data, just to, also, again, trigger the researcher. Okay, if this is data, then I need to document it like that, and I have to store that documentation as well to make it usable in the future. The other stakeholder clearly is the funder. And I'm very pleased that both ZonMW and NWO have opted for a pilot approach, a pilot study approach. So this is not law written in stone from the 1st of January, it's a pilot study, because a lot is still unknown. Unknown, for instance, are the costs of data management and the costs of curation, to pick part of it, also mentioned yesterday briefly. This is a bit of a sidetrack. So this is not immediately relevant for the researchers. It's not even immediately relevant perhaps for some of the front office staff, but we hope it will become relevant for them. The 4C project, the collaboration to clarify the costs of digital curation, wants to help organizations to understand their curation cost better, discuss it about the costs, and in the end, invest more efficiently and effectively. To that end, one of the project deliverables is a nice online platform where you can find a lot of information, but where you can also submit your own organizational costs. As a project partner, of course, we had to do that. And I must say we had to do it. In the beginning, we didn't like to do it because we were scary. All this is about trust. Not so much trust in digital or technological stuff, but trust in people and organizations. Because when we were putting together the numbers for the year 2013, of course we had the numbers, but we had to pigeonhole them into the parameters and the model of the 4C project. When we were doing that, it became very clear that the cost for the archive are roughly 25% of our total budget. And we were a bit scared that our funders would see that as a good reason to pay us less. Now, of course, like I started with, we provide more services than just the archive, but still. And if that is our thing, if that's the way we think as a project member, it can be expected that people outside of the project are even more wary of sharing such information. Still, we do it. Others have done it also. What you see here, it's not... Okay, what you see here is the costs in euros per gigabyte in our care per year, attributed to several roles within the organization. The IT developer, the preservation specialist, for instance, are relatively costly, but also some non-staff costs like hardware and software and external consultancy, for instance. So in our case, the IT developer and the preservation specialist really contribute to the cost per gigabyte stored. Now, if you compare that not just among yourselves, but to others, the green bars, again, are our numbers. The blue bars are an average of the costs provided by other organizations at the moment when I made this screenshot a couple of weeks ago. Clearly, this raises some questions. I know this is being filmed. I'm not too happy with it because it is a snapshot in time. When other organizations add their costs, this will immediately change. So please ignore the real numbers, but understand the value of it. And I see people who look at the screen, which I hope you were doing, but I think I also see some questions and doubts and so on. Something completely different. The tool developed by the 4C project is not the end, it's a means to an end. 350 years ago, Johann Blau made this most accurate map of the world, we all know that the map is not a territory. And in a similar sense, the numbers are not the territory or the story. There's a story behind the numbers. And in fact, tools like these are an invitation to start talking and to share stories and to try to understand why some can do it with less money and others seem to need more money. Maybe they are more ambitious. So, stories. Sticking to stories. Here comes my second apology, which you've all been waiting for. I expect that many of you grew up with the Grimm brother version of the Aschenputtel-Märchen. And in that version, it wasn't the fairy godmother, it was birds who granted wishes. But I like the fairy godmother's funding better. So here's Cinderella asking her classical 3 wishes, hoping that they will be granted over time by the funders. What I would like to see is that funders invest in domain-wide infrastructures. There is this data citation index with all its details and things that need to be discussed. Trusted digital repositories. We need them. Not every repository needs a seal, but at least be aware of what makes a trustworthy repository and what is not one yet. It's good if metadata initiatives to harmonize metadata schemes continue. My second major wish, because I was tricky and gave them some sub-wishes, is to invest in raising data awareness by means of expecting data management planning, but also in the carrot part by rewarding that people share data and reuse them, and to reward and recognize the effort that many people who are not researchers but who are working for researchers also have their share in the results. So it would be nice if funders also support the data supporters in the staff, in the front office. And finally, it would be good to stimulate research into data itself, in our usage of data. I think you can add a lot of wishes to this long list. So let's see what happens with the wish list. The message that I conclude with: please think about planning and not so much about plans, and please know who your colleagues and stakeholders in the other jobs and job titles are. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the Netherlands report on the dance. Are there any questions directly?
In your one diagram, you had tasks associated with these layers of front office, back office. In your table of costs, your tasks like IT services, basic development, and so on. Would you be able to map the one on the other? So, or are these orthogonal concepts? You know what
I think I understand your question. So what the cost numbers that I showed are DANS costs, so our costs. And we are strictly a back office. We don't offer front office facilities. So in the numbers you saw are related to desk office, but back office services. They are not one-to-one mapped to the services provided as a back office, if that's what you're asking for.
I need to complement that question. Often if you do consulting, so front office, if you take fields with complex data structures, and typically the service-oriented structures are partially involved in also structuring data, how to map it on storage, how to access it, how to search it, and so on, combined with the knowledge about technology implementation. So often doing consulting front office needs to have a sort of a knowledge of back office, and therefore the question in your columns with cost, I didn't look onto the cost, I looked on the functionalities, and how you would associate these functionalities of also having developer competences or IT operations competences, associated with doing consultancy or answering questions in the front office?
Yeah, I think we run into that discussion a bit when I use the word pigeonholing. So it was really difficult for us to map the budget numbers we have and the categories we have for financial accounting to what the project was asking, although we are a project member. Partly because some colleagues spend time on this and that and that. So they are consultant, but they also, and so on. So that was very a useful exercise to do, but not an easy one. And I expect that will be difficult for others as well, because indeed, there are not always clear-cut lines between responsibilities and tasks and people. So.
As long as you're in one organization, you can take the same person and split it up.
Yeah.
As soon as you introduce workings like computing center and library, then you're stuck because you have two separate organizations, and you would have to split up people between two organizations if they have overlapping tasks.
Yeah, that would be the way to go. Yeah.
I would like to know, you somewhere had a sentence about the NVO asking researchers to give the data to international repositories of international reputation or something. Does this refer to Dutch repositories only, or could they deliver data to an international repository within there? And the second part would be, what about the front offices? Are they part of Research Data Netherlands, and would they advise researchers to some different repositories than provided by the back office part?
Okay, let me start with the first part. So for this is a brand new NWO policy, and there will be changes. I expect they will be happy with any relevant repository. So they won't stick to the Dutch repositories, because that would be silly, as the situation is now. So there is a technical repository with the data seal of approval. There is DANS with the data seal of approval. There are more limited repositories with the data seal of approval, and that's it if you just look at certified repositories. So that would not accommodate a large part of research. Sorry?
3TU.
Yeah, 3TU was the technical one I meant. Okay. Sorry, yeah. Well, they have to still, indeed. But for instance, in medical sciences, there is no obvious repository in the Netherlands with a certificate. But there are lots of relevant and proven repositories in medicine, medical research, that could be used. So I expect that NWO will say either or. So if you're in this discipline, we expect you to do that, or you could do that. But I think that it will be very, what's the word? They won't have a white list saying you should go there or there. They will first see what the current practice is and the current preferences are, and then they will perhaps adapt a policy, or they come up with the whitelist. To your second question, the front office, 3TU Data Center is one of the founding fathers of Research Data Netherlands, and they have the double role. They have the university's front office, and they also provide this back office archiving system. So that's a very convenient and interesting partner. Their current practice is that technical data they will accept themselves. For other kinds of data, they will refer to colleagues. So yes, being part of Research Data Netherlands, they might refer to repositories way outside of it. Does that answer your question?
Somehow.
Okay, great. Let's continue in the break. Yeah.
So if there's no other further important question, I have one, but I will ask it during lunch. So I would say we thank the speakers of this session again. Thank you very much.